It's not a green box. It sounds like green box, but it isn't. Hello, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by once again, coming at you for one of my famed movie / Blu-ray reviews. Today I'm coming at you to review the movie and Blu-ray of Still of the Night. If looks could kill... ... Still of the Night. This is a movie that obviously I'll talk about the movie and then I'll talk about the Blu-ray released by Kino Lorber after my review of the movie. This is a movie that I grew up with. I was just watching it the other day and I was trying to think what age I was when I originally saw it. My mom, was aware of this movie and was a fan of the movie, and I think we taped it off TV. I was just trying to remember the age I was, probably possibly 10 or 11 when I first saw this, taping it off TV, watching it, I think at the same time with my mom. And, being a fan of, the Jaws movies at the time already, and Blue Thunder, and, being aware of Roy Scheider at that time in my life. I mean, I was a big fan and still am of Roy Scheider, so I was completely game to watch this movie, in particular it being a thriller and stuff like that. So I imagine I was somewhere around 10 or 11 when I first saw this. This is a movie that I grew up with and absolutely hold in extremely, totally, completely high regard. It's an absolute just class act. I mean, it's absolutely, a really, really great, little movie. And what's great about the movie, and it's kind of, it's a shame that more movies aren't made like this, but it's completely up my alley because what's great about it is it's a thriller in the most, I don't know how you'd say it, just subdued, kind of quiet way. It's a thriller in a very, very sophisticated, unfortunately, there are what you could call jump scares in it and stuff, but I think there's some of the best, the most, I don't know, tastefully done or creative or classy jump scares one could experience. I was watching it the other day thinking, oh my gosh, as much as we all, or not we all, but as much as I hate dislike jump scares and stuff, I was like, oh man, there's jump scares in this. But, in defense of the movie, I do like to think that they are kind of some of the more high-class jump scares you will ever find in a movie. First off the bat, when the movie starts, it absolutely starts in. The opening credits completely, do such a great job at, laying out the groundwork of what kind of thriller this is going to be. Just subdued and mature. This isn't like a Friday the 13th movie, as much as I love those movies, let's face it, those are, just for teens and early 20-somethings and stuff that just want to see TNA and gore and stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's totally a place for that in one's life, and that's why it's my favorite franchise of all time. But this is like the exact opposite, where it's kind of highbrow, if you will, and just classy, kind of thriller movie. And the opening credits with the moon that starts on one side of the screen, and as the credits progress it goes over to the other side. And the music, the guy who did the music for this movie, and it should be said there's not a whole lot of music in the movie, but when it's there you're very aware of it. That's one thing that's cool about the movie, is that invariably if you use music to a lesser extent, when it does appear, it's going to have much more of a, you're going to be much more aware of it, and it's going to have much more of an effect because it's only used in key significant points. But what I'm trying to say is the opening credits are so cool and classy and just lays the groundwork for what the viewer can expect for the rest of this movie. Just very, very classy, just a really, really beautiful music theme, and just a classy opening credits. And it doesn't really it's really, really classy for thriller movie. So what happens after, I'm not going to do a beat by beat of the movie, but I will say what happens after the opening credits is we see this guy in New York, presumably, who's just walking around like a car thief. Who's walking around. What's so funny about this guy is he's looking all just like, casual or whatever, and he'll stop at a car door and he'll pull on the, the handle of the door, but he does it 3 times with every vehicle, and it's kind of like, well, and all these vehicles are locked, and you're kind of like, well, if it doesn't open on the first try, why is he doing 2 more tries? But I think it's a way to show the viewer that this guy's a car thief. But I guess, from a filmmaker standpoint, it just makes sense to try to pound home the idea that this is a car thief by having him yank on these car doors the handles rather, like 3 times, kick, 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 but whatever. This guy's going around trying to find a car that's unlocked so he can, presumably hotwire it and drive it away or whatever, and then one of these, I think it's maybe probably the third or something, car door he tries to open, this body falls out, just completely, so early on into the movie where we're already got like a kind of a, half-ass kind of a maybe jump scare / shock moment where this body of this guy is like throat slit or something like that, falls out of this car, and it makes you wonder if this car thief is going to give up car thieving after that experience, or if he called the cops. That would have been funny. It's kind of funny how they don't mention, did this car thief call the cops, and if so, what did he tell the cops? Oh, I'm a car thief and I was just pulling on doors. Oh, thank you very much for, for letting us know about this body. You're under arrest, Mr. Car Thief. So it's kind of funny how they, the storyteller leaves that out of this movie, like, the writer of the movie leaves that detail out, like how did, the police or the quote-unquote authorities come to find out about the body or whatever, but that's just something we're not supposed to think about. So after that scene, we cut to Roy Scheider, who, is basically, and finishing up, he's a psychiatrist or psychologist, I don't know. He's one of the two. He's a shrink, or we'll just say he's a shrink. Maybe psychiatrist maybe is what he is, or something like that. If he's not that, he's a psychologist. He's a shrink, and he's just finishing up a session with this guy who just lost his job, and he, to show the audience, right off the bat what kind of a great guy this Roy Scheider shrink guy is. This guy's like, oh, I just, I lost my job, and let's face it, I can't afford to pay for these sessions anymore. And Roy Scheider is like, Sam is his character. Do you really think I'm going to stop seeing you just because he couldn't afford it? Which to me is, telling the audience, well, this guy's such a stand-up guy, he's going to keep seeing this guy even though for free because he cares about the guy. And wow, what a character. But beginning of the movie introduces Roy Scheider character, and then with some really, really clever, usage of a tape, answering machine thing, playback, we find out very quickly that he's recently divorced, which is kind of ironic. This guy who's supposed to be helping people with other problems can't even keep his marriage together, which is something that he, the character himself says later on. So through some very, very, clever writing and just really quick use of an answering machine, we find out that he's recently divorced, and he just moved out and got himself set up in a new apartment and stuff, and getting the, his chair or office ready for, cleaning it up for the next visitor or whatever. And this woman appears, Meryl Streep is the second billing in this movie, Roy Scheider Meryl Streep movie, and of course, this is kind of the Meryl Streep I grew up with. This is probably, when I was a kid, probably really the only Meryl Streep I ever really saw until like Death Becomes Her came out and stuff. Obviously being a preteen and a teenager, I'm not going to be really watching a whole lot of Meryl Streep movies. It was more like, Freddy, Chucky, and Jason movies at the time, and Texas Chainsaw films and stuff. So, this is probably my first introduction, I would imagine, to Meryl Streep or whatever. Obviously at this, a lot of people probably aren't really familiar with her at this young of an age. People my age or younger and stuff, so it is kind of interesting to see her at this younger age and stuff. Of course, later on I'd see the movie Manhattan and stuff and see her even younger and stuff. Of course, I don't really like her character in that movie, but who does? Anyway, I'm talking about this movie, but instantly. Oh, one thing I do want to say about this movie is that it's instantly interesting. You know how there's so many movies and stuff that they play like they're completely boring, and they play like they're gonna, they're always leading up to something, and there's gonna be a payoff, but there never really is. Like, I've always argued that movies don't have to be like that. If a movie's well written and conceived, a movie should be able to be interesting, right off the bat, from the first scene or from the first, moment of the movie all the way through until the end. And this movie, in my opinion, is a perfect example of that, where it's just from the moment it starts with the opening credits, and then the body coming out of the car introducing Roy Scheider. It's completely and totally interesting from from the moment it starts as the movie, from the beginning to the end. I mean, it sounds like a cliched kind of a, see this movie, it's a must-see, whatever, little, blurb from a whatever, trying to sell the movie or whatever, but in my opinion, that's completely and totally how I regard this movie. So this movie is so good at very quickly and efficiently just laying down plot points and stuff that the next scene or the next moment we'll see, Meryl Streep's character, Brooke Reynolds, I think that's her name, character name in this movie, shows up, and of course, we just found out that he's recently divorced, so he's obviously single and available and stuff. So this, I mean, I'm not gonna say, I mean, I don't know. I mean, she's not really my type at any age, Meryl Streep. So I mean, obviously, she's not ugly or whatever, but I wouldn't exactly necessarily call, in my opinion, Meryl Streep any kind of a great beauty or anything like that. So she's never really been my, my forte. But for, the filmmaker, I think, is presenting her in this. I mean, I guess you could call her cute or something like that, but I wouldn't even. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The filmmaker in the movie is presenting her as some young, beauty or whatever, quiet, subdued beauty or whatever. She comes into his office. The guy at the beginning of the movie, George Biner, was the body that fell out of the car at the beginning of the movie. So, or George, is it what? George Bynum, rather, I think is his name, of the victim. So this woman shows up, Meryl Streep character, Brooke Reynolds, shows up, and knowing that, Bynum was a patient with Sam's character, shows up, and in a really kind of a, very quickly, we get a lot of information that she's basically got George's watch, who, he left when he was, over visiting with her, and comes by to, it's amazing how much information we get very quickly in this movie. Comes by to give the watch to Sam in hopes that he can return it to George's wife without saying anything about her, which obviously tells the audience that, Bynum, the dead guy at the beginning of the movie, and is a former patient of, Sam, who played by Roy Scheider in this movie, was fooling around on his wife with Meryl Streep character, Brooke Reynolds. I don't know how I remember all these names. Well, I got them written down, that helps. But, so, like I say, we get so much information early on in the movie, and, having rewatched it just recently, I was just kind of like, if I was in his place, and I think he does say to her, wouldn't it have been easier if you just mailed it? Like, I probably wouldn't have even done it, but obviously this guy is very taken by her, youthful, quote-unquote, beautiful appearance or whatever, so he's probably, maybe more willing to do, this for a woman looking like that rather than someone who looks like some, ugly woman or whatever. Maybe if she was an ugly woman, he would just give her the watch, but that's what I would do regardless of what the woman looked like. I'd say, look, this isn't my problem. You leave it on a doorstep, throw it away. I mean, you don't even need to do anything with the watch. The watch, incidentally, has inscription on the inside of it saying, like, to George from his loving wife or whatever. So, I guess that's the reason why Brooke wants the watch returned, because, I don't know, well, like it's going to be sentimental to the wife of the dead husband or whatever, but, if I was this Sam character, I'd be like, I ain't getting mixed up in this, regardless of what the hell the woman looks like, and definitely if she looked like, Meryl Streep, I'd say, take a hike and take your watch or George's watch with you. It's not my problem. But he takes the watch, and I guess, through dialogue later on in the movie, does give it back to the wife, and you kind of have to wonder, oh, well, I guess. I just thought it was kind of shitty of the character of Brooke Reynolds in this movie, like, giving him the watch and, like, making up a lie for him that she would like him to tell the wife. It's just like, God, what a tool, like, Sam instantly becomes. We don't see a scene of him giving it back to the wife. It would be interesting in seeing what Sam says. Well, he probably says what Brooke tell him to say, because he's all smitten with her, her face or whatever. But that's, very early on in this movie, the web, the kind of, the web is set, or the stage is set for what's going to happen in this movie, where, this character of Sam is, instantly weaved into this web of, murder and mystery or whatever. And right after, or actually while Brooke's still there, a cop shows up. Bzzz, yeah, can I talk with you? What's really funny about this scene is, like, Brooke just shows up, walks in the door, and this cop has to get buzzed in or something. I don't quite understand, the logistics behind that, but whatever. So, and what's funny is, he tells the cop to wait in the waiting room, and will just slip Brooke out. So, like, instantly, he's just, Sam is caught in this web of, intrigue and mystery and whatever. And already, as an accessory, just moments after meeting this woman, and slips her out the back way, and there's this little suspense scene. This is what I mean, the movie just doesn't stop. There's this little suspense scene now where Brooke, having just left the office, the cop comes in, the detective guy wants to talk to this guy about the late George Bynum, and the watch is sitting, you know, with the, you know, to George from your loving wife, is sitting, you know, with that, you know, shining up, that writing facing up into the room on the desk, and it's like right in the middle of the desk, and he doesn't want the cop to see it because it'll ask about it, and oh my gosh, so as the cop's asking him questions, there's this little suspense bit where he's like, okay, and he covers up the watch with his date book, and the cop wants to borrow the date book and takes it off, and he's just like, you know, instantly when I first saw this as a kid and I was watching this with my mom, I'm like, you know, this is so awesome, and it's just done silently, you know, where then he's kind of like, just wants to remove get the watch the hell off the desk, but he doesn't want to do it in a way that brings attention to it. I mean, this is what I mean. This movie, before it's like even 10 minutes into the movie, is already a 4-star movie. It's such a great movie. Oh my gosh, as you could tell, I'm just gushing about this movie. That's because it's so freaking awesome. And now as I'm recounting scenes to you, it's just like I realize how awesome it is. It's just great. So obviously, you know, he's talking to the cop, doesn't, you know, just answers some few basic questions. At one point he just is like, just takes the watch off and kind of just puts it in the desk and like puts his arms there like he was clearing the desk just to put his arms there. And you know, he doesn't have a lot of information for the cop, and the cop asks what he was seeing the deceased for, and you know, Sam can't tell him. And I promised you I wasn't going to do a beat by beat. I promise you I won't continue to do that. I just wanted to set it up and show you, you know, how the movie sets everything up, and how, you know, the Sam character of Roy Scheider is just instantly, you know, drawn into this web of, you know, whatever, just intrigue. Just because I guess, you know, and the plot point about him being newly divorced probably is a big key factor in it. Like I say, if he was married still and this, you know, woman was piggish, you know, just ugly woman or whatever, he might not be so willing to get swept up in this web of intrigue, but she's a young Meryl Streep, so I guess he's got an eye for that kind of thing. So now being all interested, you know, and kind of curious about Bynum's death and stuff like that, what's really interesting about this movie is he goes through, you know, past sessions that he has written down on paper. I don't think he's got anything audio recorded, but he just, you know, writes stuff down. I don't know if shrieks do that. They write stuff down or whatever, notes or key plot points. Oh my gosh. That's kind of rare on this channel, an actual sneeze in real time. But so, you know, later, the next scene or whatever, doing stuff. After this, I'm gonna stop doing a beat by beat. But in scenes following, a lot of this, you know, the first half of this movie or whatever, a lot of this Sam character going through past sessions and notes of past sessions with Bynum from earlier in the year all the way up to present and stuff, and trying to figure out the mystery of, you know, what's going on with, you know, past history and stuff, and bits and pieces of information that he gives over the months and stuff. This movie is absolutely, completely, and totally fantastically conceived and executed to be able to, you know, have this guy presented dead at the beginning of the movie, and then kind of, you know, through these notes of past sessions, get caught up in the history and stuff between, you know, this character of George Bynum and, you know, this between him and the Sam Shrink character and stuff is absolutely fascinating. And obviously the bits of information we find out along the way and stuff are very, you know, paints Brooke more and more as a potential suspect and stuff. And, you know, that she's got, you know, throughout the movie and stuff, she'll have meetings, or, you know, another thing I forgot to mention about that in first meeting, you know, with Brooke and Sam, is that she accidentally, you know, in a panic, kind of broke one of the statue on his desk or whatever, and working at an antique or you know, an auction house or whatever. One of the reasons she later on visits him is to bring him a kind of a replacement, having felt bad for breaking his, you know, antique thing. She brings him a replacement antique thing, which she'll probably break later on. I mean, it's just, that's a joke. It doesn't happen, but maybe in Still of the Night Part 2 she can accidentally break this other thing. But what I'm saying is, you know, throughout the movie, you know, we just see him just a fantastically written and, you know, conceived and executed way. You know, we get more and more information about, you know, the kind of man that George Bynum was and the kind of woman that Brooke is. And as I said, as the movie goes on, we see, you know, through hearing those kind of things and seeing her also when we see her in the movie interact with Sam in certain scenes, obviously she's just more and more, we're kind of more and more convinced as an audience that, gosh, you know, she's probably the killer. As if this movie isn't already great and high class enough, it actually features Jessica Tandy as Roy Scheider's mom in this movie, and she's like a shrink too. So shrink mom and shrink son has this, at one point in this movie, I think that's like the second scene with her, has this really cool scene together where, you know, they're the shrink family, mom and son, are trying to figure out this George Bynum's dream we hear later on in the movie. But I just wanted to say that Jessica Tandy's in this movie, that adding even more class to an already classy movie, and you know, her scenes are great, she's great of course, and you know, what can I say? All I gotta say is Jessica Tandy's in this movie. Oh yeah, one thing in my babbling that I forgot to mention earlier is when the cop came first at the very beginning of the movie to visit him, one of the suspense lines he lays down is, well, you know, if the killer got the idea that you knew some information about, you know, the death or whatever, you might be in danger as well or whatever. And then in one of the very early scenes, flashback scenes of, you know, when he's going through the notes of former sessions with George Bynum, we actually see the scenes played out. So that's really cool. It's not like he's just reading it off the paper or whatever. And I think one of the first flashback scenes we see, Bynum's like, oh, you're the only person, you know, what if someone you knew had actually killed someone, and because their family was really rich, no one ever found out about it. As a matter of fact, I'm the only one who knows about it, you know, except for, and of course now you. And it's just like, oh my gosh, it's just so creepy, you know, like, oh my gosh, like just trying to be a shrink and make a living or something. Sam finds himself just being, you know, drawn into this web of intrigue and murder and stuff. It's just so creepy. But what I was saying is so now basically, you know, he's just unwittingly, or just, you know, he's in the web of intrigue or whatever, and there's this just in true still in the night fashion, like he's doing his laundry in the basement of his, you know, new apartment building or whatever, and he's reading through some George Bynum past sessions and stuff, and you know, it's just so wonderfully placed dialogue. It's just like, if someone, you know, had killed someone, do you think they'd do it again? And it's just like he's in the basement and the lights go out or something, and it's just, oh my god, like instantly in the scene, there's this great suspense scene. And this is what I mean about this movie being, you know, the opposite of a kind of a slasher, you know, exploitation movie. And just, it's just such a quiet, classy thriller. And the scene in the basement, like, even if you've seen it a billion times and you know what's coming, it's still like everything's so quiet and, you know, static. It's just like, even if you've seen it a billion times, it's still creepy. The scene of him in the basement and stuff, and it ends with Brooke coming to give him that, you know, that trinket that I mentioned and stuff. And at this, no, I don't think the kiss happens at this. No, it happens the next time she comes to visit him or whatever. But so yeah, so I'm going to try not to do a beat by beat, but I will simply say that, you know, this is, you know, fantastic. I mean, the movie never stops, I've already said that, but fantastic suspense bit in the basement, and Brooke comes to give him the replacement trinket thing, and you know, of course, every time we see her, she's just kind of more and more mysterious and more a potential killer. Of course, he doesn't want her to be, because he wants her in his bed or whatever, and he doesn't want to have his life in danger, but too bad it is. So to not do a beat by beat of the movie, I'll just simply say that's the movie. As it progresses, we just, you know, find out more and more about George Bynum and more about Brooke, and it just becomes, you know, obviously more and more clear the more information we get that, gosh, you know, I can't imagine anyone but Brooke being the killer, just because of the way she acts and the things that Bynum said about her and all this kind of stuff. So it's just this great mystery that unfolds throughout the, you know, the course of the movie. And another big part, you know, strong part of the, or, you know, big detail about this movie is, you know, this place, which in the movie is Crispin's, an auction house, which I think is actually probably Christie's. But, you know, it's, a lot of times when, you know, an outfit, a big, huge, actual entity doesn't want to have their name, especially in a thriller, horror, kind of a thriller movie, dragged into, you know, in case the movie, you know, gives people a bad, you know, they don't want their name smeared through some movies. So I think Christie's is actually renamed Crispin's. Actually, kind of almost like Crispin's better than Christie's in the movie. But the Crispin's in the movie, the auction house, is where the what's his name, the George Bynum and Meryl Streep, or the George Bynum and Brooke Reynolds characters, worked and met, and Meryl Streep, character still works there, and is heavily, the auction house is heavily featured, throughout like the second half of the movie. And again, it's just kind of it lends, it adds to the classiness of the movie, and it's just like you're watching this movie and these people paying these absurd prices for these things, and you're just like, oh my God, people, this is truth. Like, people actually do this, like instead of going to the mall, these, multi-millionaires' idea of a good time is going and paying, $1 million for a painting or whatever, and it's just like, yeah, whatever. So I'm really trying hard not to do a beat by beat, but I will simply say there's, obviously being a thriller movie, there's several thrilling scenes throughout the movie. One where he's doing his laundry, which, yeah, I can imagine pitching this to the studio. Yeah, there's this one really thrilling scene where he's doing his laundry. It's actually not while, it's after he did his laundry. That's the thrilling scene. But there's another one where, Roy Scheider character follows Meryl Streep character, or what looks like to be the Meryl Streep character at night into Central Park, and he's trying to meet up with her, and her phone wasn't answering, or she wasn't answering the door either, and he thinks it's her, and he follows her into the Central Park, or this woman that looks like her or whatever, only to lose her and be like bugged in this famous bridge tunnel thing, and is actually the guy who mugs him is actually the Glazer from the film The Burning, if you've seen that, from around the same time. So that's kind of interesting. I don't know if this is, it's probably right around the same time, maybe from the motion picture The Burning. So Glazer, down on his luck, having come back to life from the film The Burning, is now robbing Roy Scheider in this movie. But it's a really kind of a cool scene because Roy Scheider's character is like asking him, okay, you can have whatever you want, but can you do me a favor and make sure I get out of the park okay? And the Glazer's like, your coat, give me your coat. And so Glazer puts on, the mugger puts on his coat, and Roy Scheider walks out, and you see this really cool shot of like the woman coming down the stairs as the mugger's putting on the coat, and we see Scheider walking away, and you hear So because the mugger, aka Glazer, from The Burning, put on his coat in the dark shadows of the night, in the still of the night, the dark shadows in the still of the night, this guy was killed thinking, because the killer thought that, wearing his coat, it was actually Roy Scheider character. So that was really kind of cool. I mean, like I said earlier, everything about this movie is really kind of cool. So I think it's like the hour point of the movie or something, or maybe even 50-minute point or something like that. Already the movie's gonna kind of start its final act, which basically starts when Brooke Reynolds invited him to this auction, this big ballyhoo auction or whatever, where a painting is expected to go for $1 million or whatever. And it's really kind of a cool. It's the whole movie is kind of cool. What the hell am I talking about? But the scene is really cool because when he goes up to first meet her in her office or whatever, he goes in the door and she's instantly got this clipping that's all ripped up, and she just put it, she's really surprised by him just being in her office or showing up right at the door in her office, and is just looking all whatever, just suspicious, putting this stuff away in her desk and locking it. And they then go downstairs to the auction or whatever, and she gives him a place to sit and drops her keys and goes off to the the front kind of podium thing to do her job during the auction or whatever. And just Roy Scheider character being so inquisitive, grabs the keys off the ground, and he's like got her keys now, and he's just like, oh gosh, should I or shouldn't I? And he basically decides to risk it and gets up during the auction and sneaks up into her office. He's got to know what was in that desk, and he puts the clippings, he goes in there and sneaks up in there and opens everything up and puts the clippings together, and it's some kind of I don't know, Italian or European writing on it or whatever, and this guy, being murdered or dead or whatever. And then sometime during that time, Brooke sees that he's not there, he's disappeared from his chair, and she goes up to figures he went up to her office or whatever, and it's kind of weird. I was just watching it recently, and the only part of this movie I'd say makes no sense. I think we're supposed to forget about it. Is that really cool shot where there's this this razor thing hanging on a rope or whatever, and a character grabs it and turns it up and like cuts itself, uses it to cut it free from the rope. It's supposed to be used in this work area for all these antiques and stuff, but it's a really cool shot, and it's just like, oh my god, the killer's gonna come kill him, and then Brooke shows up, to confront them in the office and get her keys back, and she looks just pissed or whatever, like she's gonna kill him, and then obviously, I guess. Yeah, but I don't want to ruin it. Well, we'll just say that at the end of the day, having everything revealed the way it does, I don't want to ruin the movie, but I will just say that it makes no sense when the movie's all said and done, retrospectively, that that bit of cutting that thing free from the the razor free from the rope that it was dangling on, it doesn't make any sense. Well, I guess I'll just ruin it enough to say, obviously, at the end of the day, at the end of the movie, the Brooke Reynolds character is not the killer. So I guess that's why I'm not going to spoil it and say who the killer is in case you want to see it, but I kind of already spoiled it, I guess, a little, but I'm not going to fully spoil it. So, but I mean, obviously, in a movie, if someone's just, just so much, presented as a suspect, they're obviously not going to be that. We already knew that, but I'm just saying that's probably the weakest part of the movie that I can see, is like, why, if she's not actually the killer, in reality, did she, we presume it's her, maybe it was the killer who did it, it was hiding in the shadows, we don't know, but that's just one of the weakest parts of the movie. Obviously, after that, she's just really pissed, and it looks like she's gonna kill him, and this security guard's like, hey, everything okay up here? And it looked like she was gonna kill him at that point, and it's like, oh my god, did the security guard save Sam, which is Roy Scheider's character? But obviously after that, she's all pissed and kind of just says goodbye, and because at this point, they'd actually gotten like all kissy and sweet on each other or whatever. So now Roy Scheider's like, god damn it, I can't win with women. Like, he doesn't say that, but I mean, he's like, oh, recently divorced, now recently dumped, before he even got any, and it's just like, oh man. And he meets on the way out, he's just gonna leave Crispin's at that time, and on the way out he meets the detective guy who's like, yeah, we're gonna this one guy saw, we'll just cut it short and say this one guy's here to ID this woman, basically Meryl Streep character, and Roy Scheider character is like, oh my god, I gotta save her or whatever. It's so weird because, I mean, at this point, I don't know if he I don't know if he thinks she's guilty or innocent at this point or not, but there's this classic scene where he sees throughout the auction process that someone wins something. This guy comes and they got to fill out something or probably sign something and take it back up front or whatever. So he's like, gosh, if I buy something, I can slip Brooke a note that way. So he ends up participating in an auction for this piece of shit, just crappy painting. Ends up paying $15,000 for this painting just to slip Brooke a note saying, the police are here, get out of the room, or get out of here because they're looking for you or whatever. And it's just like, that scene is just so awesome, and god dang, you can see how desperate this guy is for a little, whatever action. He's paying $15,000 just to give her a note. It's like, holy shit. You wonder why he's not living in a better apartment if he's got that kind of money to waste, but oh man. I think this review is already probably going on way too long, so I'll simply say that, the end of the movie, the place that it takes place out at Brooke's old family, house, probably, country family house. It's probably built a long time ago, late 1800s or early 1900s, and there was this, I forgot to mention, that's because I'm trying not to do beat by beat this whole movie, there's a really cool, dream scene where George Bynum has this dream, and it, ties up with a lot of information about who the killer really is and all this and that. But as when we were watching it, me and Mom were first watching it, mid movie or early movie, or maybe within the first third of the movie, we experienced that dream as George Bynum was talking about it or whatever, we kind of experienced it in a movie form. And as Roy Scheider is driving out to meet Brooke at the end of the movie, Mom's like, where do you think this place is going to be? And I'm like, this is the house from the dream. I just knew it. And maybe it was obvious to anyone, but as a 10 or 11-year-old, I felt kind of, I was just so into the movie. Obviously it's going to be the house from the dream, and it's so, as he's driving out there, it's so moody and atmospheric, and it's like super duper magic hour. That like there's several shots as the car is approaching the area where it's just a faint little bit of like daylight, is left enough to light. It's so classily lit and stuff like that, and it's just creepy being the viewer. The funny thing is, the Roy Scheider character didn't get to see the location like we got to see the location, so the audience kind of knows. Well, he does through certain stuff too, because like in the dream there's a real cat on the roof, and then when he gets there's this fake kind of ceramic cat on the roof. So maybe he knows as well that this is the same place that Bynum was, talking about in his dream or whatever. But I'll just simply say, without doing a beat by beat, that the end of the movie is really kind of creepy, and the conversation with whatever Scheider and Streep in this scene, and Meryl Streep does this completely and totally amazing classic monologue where she talks about, well, I just won't even bother mentioning what she talks about. We'll just, if you haven't seen it, that'll be even more reason for you to see it. It's just, we'll just say absolutely fantastically amazing monologue that even now, having seen it so many times and stuff, you just hang on every word when she's saying it. And of course, we'll just simply say the killer ends up, there's this thriller, suspense scene at the end, or the killer ends up trying to kill him, and obviously all's well that ends well. And obviously I won't, I kind of spoiled half of it by saying Brooke isn't the killer, but I won't spoil the rest of it by saying who is. It just turns out to be really kind of cool, and just like, oh wow, well that makes sense or whatever, and it all comes together in such a great way, and just ends with happily ever after or whatever. And once again, really super duper classy, great closing credits. And what's cool is it's the same theme from the opening, but we get to see kind of a more embellished version. The music, oh my god, like opening and closing credits music is so unbelievably beautiful and classy and stuff. So if you haven't guessed it, I'm going to be able to give this movie 4 out of 4 stars. It's more like a 5 out of 4 star movie. It's like that good. I mean, Roy Scheider, Meryl Streep, Jessica Tandy as Roy Scheider's mom. What the hell more do you want? Absolutely first-rate, kind of Hitchcockian. But I'd almost say even more classy than your traditional Hitchcock. I mean, Hitchcock stuff has its own kind of, I don't know, campiness to it. This doesn't really have necessarily any campiness to it. It's just frickin' class act from top to bottom, start to finish, man. Absolutely fantastic. And now on to my review of I was trying to look and see when this was released. I'll probably put it on the screen in red letters when this came out, the Blu-ray by Kino Lorber. Looking on the back here, the movie is from 1982. And it doesn't say any special features on the back, but there are special features. There's like trailers of like other Roy Scheider, which incidentally, having seen there's other Roy Scheider movies that Kino Lorber put out on Blu-ray, so having seen those trailers and never having seen those movies, I'm actually going to plan to buy the Blu-rays and watch them. 52 Pickup is a trailer on here in addition to the trailer of this movie, and then there's another one that's on here, The Last Embrace, I think, that I also want to pick up that Kino Lorber put out. But I think that's really the only special features, just like 3 trailers or whatever. But this movie, I mean the Blu-ray looks absolutely amazing, and I think the only thing this had been on, obviously VHS, it was a DVD that I found used like years and years and years ago, and I think it was one of those burn-on-demand ones where because I was like, this wasn't on DVD. I was just so thrilled to be able to find this on DVD, and of course I think it was Anamorphic 185, but I don't think it necessarily looked that great. But I mean, at the time I was like, well, it's better than nothing. So I think the only DVD release of this was a burn-on-demand version. So it was very, very thrilling to have, you know, Kino Lorber put out this version, of course. What can I say? It looks absolutely fantastic, and you guys know, if you've seen some of my reviews, that I'm a grain guy, and I'd say the grain in this movie is just a perfect amount of grain, which, you know, gets a little bit less and a little bit more depending on, you know, brighter or darker scenes or whatever. But unlike that review I did of a Blu-ray a while back, was a Blood Harvest or whatever, which of course was a 16mm movie, and on top of that was a 4K scan of a 16mm movie. Like, that was like, even for a grain lover, that movie on Blu-ray was just way too grainy. This is like the perfect amount of grain. This movie looks absolutely stunning, and, you know, as I've said in so many Blu-ray reviews, probably the best this movie's ever going to look in this Kino Lorber presentation. You know, being in 1982 and a lower, you know, profile movie, of course, it's just, I would imagine it's just mono audio, and it's very quiet even on the Blu-ray, and I found myself having to turn up the volume a little louder than on normal movies as a result. But, you know, the sound is really good. It's just a little quiet, and the image is absolutely amazing. If you haven't seen this movie, I mean, I don't know, I hate to recommend you guys, you know, spend your money on buying stuff, but if you like thrillers, just kind of classy, more just, you know, mature thrillers, mature in the sense that it's not all just on-screen bloodshed and just a lot of I mean, this isn't a movie for people who have ADHD, we'll put it that way. Like, if you don't like slow movies, you might not want to, you know, you might not be interested in this. But if you like Roy Scheider and or Jessica Tandy and or, you know, Meryl Streep or whatever, and just like early 80s classy thriller movies, you really can't do any better than Still of the Night. Highly recommended movie, highly recommended Blu-ray. Thank you very much for watching my review of it, and as always, we'll catch you on the next movie review. So I forgot to mention in my review of the movie, of course, having seen this movie for the very first time and you know, off a TV version, and recorded it off TV, and subsequently, you know, for the first several years, you know, of owning and watching this movie, was the TV version. One thing I wanted to mention is, you know, in the 90s, when I would probably eventually get a hold of like a previously viewed VHS of the movie, would be the first time, although I think it is PG movie, or maybe, I think it's PG, yeah, because PG-13 didn't even start until I think after the movie was made. So I think even though it's a PG movie, there were still like edits for TV, and I was actually kind of disappointed. And one of the, you know, the edits for TV actually, I think, was improved the movie in a rare case, and it's this line where, you know, George Bynum is talking about Brooke and this, you know what he's trying to do to seduce her and whatever, and just slowly, you know, whatever, and he says like, you know, this flashback scene where he's talking and you see Roy Scheider's character reading the notes and stuff, and George Bynum says, "I put my hand on her breast and she didn't do, you know, she didn't make a move to stop me." And then Roy Scheider's character's apartment buzzer goes off, like his mom's there to for whatever reason, you know, Jessica Tandy or whatever. And that was like, when I saw the actual VHS tape, the actual uncut version, it was kind of a bummer, because the way it was that, you know, on the TV version, it's really weird that they'd have to be so, you know, so pansy that they couldn't even have the character say, "I put my hand on her breast." And it was awesome the way they did it in the TV edit, because the way they did it was, the guy goes, "I put my hand on her," and then the buzzer goes, "Nee," and then you hear the line, "and she didn't make a move. She didn't do a thing to stop me." And it's like, oh my gosh, that was just so cool. And I was actually disappointed having, you know, later on in the 90s see the, you know, the uncut version, the theatrical version, and see that I thought that was a really cute touch. I was just like, I realized at that point that that's not how the movie originally was. It was originally, you know, in a way that he just says the breast, and the TV edit was like, "Nee," and it was just so much more creative, I thought. So that was one of the rare instances, probably one of the only instances that I can ever think of, that I actually thought an instance where a TV edit, I thought, was actually a creative improvement over the theatrical, you know, director's original version. And I forgot to say that in my review, and I just wanted to do this postscript audio moment here and tell you guys about that. It was just so cool that I didn't want to let that go. So thank you very much for watching this video, and we'll see you next time.